The rain had already turned Austin into a blur of silver streaks when Harper Quinn pushed her electric scooter through the deserted parking lot at 3 in the morning. Lightning cracked across the sky, briefly showing her reflection in a puddle, soaked hoodie, tangled hair, tired eyes. It was not a glamorous life, but it was hers, and tonight the alarm on her phone had pulled her straight out of sleep, a system meltdown warning. She was the only on-call technician still awake enough or poor enough to be reachable. Harper shoved the scooter against the wall and swiped her security badge. The door beeped, letting her into the dim corridor. A draft of cold air crawled across the floor. Something felt wrong. She swallowed and took a breath, whispering to herself that it was only another night shift. But when she stepped toward the elevator, a second alarm went off. This one was deeper and more urgent, the kind that meant physical danger instead of digital failure. Water. A leak somewhere. She hurried down the stairs, heart pounding, following the blinking emergency lights that turned everything a pulsing red. The smell hit her first. Burnt wires, wet concrete, electrical smoke. No, no, no. She reached the basement landing. The entire floor shimmered with half an inch of water reflecting broken light like shattered glass. Sparks snapped from the wall panel near the server room. Harper froze. If she stepped wrong, she would be walking straight into a live circuit. She moved 1 foot back toward the stairwell, but the emergency system flashed again. If she did nothing, the building would trigger a full lockdown. Anyone stuck in an elevator would be trapped until morning. Harper clenched her jaw. She was not going to let someone else suffer just because the tech budget had been cut. She stepped forward, carefully testing each tile with the rubber sole of her boot. Water rippled around her as she crossed the room. Twice she slipped, arms flailing, but she caught herself against the wall before she touched the sparking panel. Her breath shook. A small tremor ran through her legs, fear or adrenaline or both. She opened the server room door. The sound inside was louder, a mechanical whirring that kept cutting in and out like breathing. She crouched beside the main control unit. Moisture glistened along the bottom wires. This was worse than she expected. One wrong move and the system would fry entirely. She unplugged her tablet with shaking fingers and began running diagnostics. The tower overhead flickered. Somewhere inside this massive building, people slept oblivious to how close they were to waking to chaos. The tablet flashed an alert. Elevator car 27 had gone offline 15 minutes earlier. Harper cursed under her breath. That meant someone was stuck. She opened the manual control board and began rerouting power to the emergency release system. A faint voice crackled through the intercom. "Hello, is someone there?" Harper leaned toward the speaker. "I am here. Are you stuck inside elevator 27? A breath of relief came through the line. Yes. The doors will not open. The lights are out. Everything feels tilted. Her heart thudded. She traced the circuits again, rushing to find a safe path around the damaged wiring. The water around her shoes shimmered with each spark. "Just hang on a little longer," she said. "I am trying to free you, but the system is unstable." "What is your name?" he asked. "Harper." "I am Harper." "Thank you, Harper." His voice was low and steady, but she could hear tension underneath. She pressed a series of manual overrides, fingers trembling as sparks danced dangerously close to her wrist. The building groaned as the emergency brakes on the elevator released. The intercom clicked again as the man drew a breath like he had been holding it for minutes. The doors just opened. "Thank you," Harper exhaled shakily. The danger was not gone yet, but at least he was safe. "You should head to the stairwell," she said. "Do not use any elevators until the system stabilizes." She stepped back from the panel, relieved. But in that moment, her heel hit a slick patch. She slipped. Her hand flew toward the sparking panel. Her breath caught. 1 second before her palm touched the metal, she twisted her body and slammed onto the wet floor instead. Pain shot through her hip, but she was alive. The sparks hissed inches from her cheek. Harper pushed herself upright. The intercom crackled again, softer now. "You should not have risked yourself for someone you did not know." She blinked up at the speaker. "It is what anyone should do." Silence answered her at first. Then the voice returned, edged with something she did not understand. No Harper. Not anyone. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. A tall figure emerged from the stairwell, only his silhouette visible beneath the flickering lights. He paused, watching her. She could not see his face clearly, but she felt something about him, a presence, a weight, a stillness. He said quietly, "Thank you for helping me." Before she could ask who he was, he stepped backward into the shadows, and as suddenly as he arrived, he was gone, leaving only the fading sound of his footsteps and the distant rumble of thunder. Harper sat on the floor breathing hard. The emergency lights calmed to a soft yellow. She survived. The building survived. The stranger survived. She wiped rain and sweat from her forehead. Whoever that man was, she would probably never see him again. But she would be wrong. Because that man, the one whose life she saved without knowing him, was Evan Maxwell, the billionaire CEO who owned this entire tower, and by morning he would be standing at her front door. Harper barely slept after the chaos in the basement, drifting in and out of shallow dreams filled with flickering lights and the echo of that stranger's voice. By the time dawn crept across her tiny apartment, she was still lying fully dressed on her couch, staring at the ceiling fan that clicked every few seconds like a metronome counting down the hours. She told herself she would report the system meltdown in the morning, like any responsible technician, maybe fill out a maintenance request. Maybe warn the building manager about the near electrocution. But her mind kept returning to the man whose calm voice had kept her grounded in the darkness. She wondered if he made it home safely, if he was still shaken, if he even remembered her. She doubted it. People who worked in buildings like that rarely remembered the invisible workers who kept everything running. Her phone buzzed with a new shift reminder. 8 hours until she had to return. She sat up, groaning at the ache in her hip from last night's fall. The storm had eased, leaving the morning strangely quiet. She dragged herself to the kitchenette, poured cereal into a chipped bowl, and told herself that once she finished eating, she would shower, rest, and pretend her life was not held together by sheer willpower. Then came the knock. Sharp, firm, too early for deliveries, too purposeful to be a neighbor. Harper froze with the spoon halfway to her mouth. No one knocked on her door at 7 in the morning. Her building was not the kind of place where surprise visits happened. She set the bowl down quietly and walked toward the door, feeling a prickle on the back of her neck. Another knock. Harper swallowed and opened it. Rainlight spilled into the hallway, and with it, a man. The man. He stood on her welcome mat, as if he had stepped out of a world that did not belong to hers. His suit was dark and slightly damp from the storm, the shoulders tailored to fit someone who moved with precision rather than luck. His hair was pushed back, but a few strands had fallen loose as if even the weather refused to argue with him. His eyes were steady calm and far too direct for someone visiting a stranger in a run-down apartment. Harper's mouth went dry. She knew instantly. This was the voice from the elevator. This was the silhouette from the basement. This was the man who had thanked her before disappearing like a ghost. He held her gaze. Harper Quinn. The way he said her name made her heart skip. She did not remember telling it to him, but she must have through the elevator speaker. "Yes," she whispered. He studied her face with an intensity that made her shift her weight. She thought for a second he looked tired, not physically, but something deeper, like he had been carrying a sleepless burden for years. "I am Evan Maxwell," he said. The name landed like a shockwave. Harper had heard it 1,000 times. Maxwell Dynamics, Maxwell Security Network, Maxwell Data Systems. The man owned half of the tech infrastructure in Texas. People talked about him like he was more blueprint than human. Quiet, distant, exacting, untouchable. And now he was standing in front of her apartment door looking like he had walked straight out of a Forbes cover and into the wrong part of town. Harper's voice came out uneven. "You're Evan Maxwell?" He nodded once. "And you saved me last night?" Her breath hitched. She had not prepared for this. Not for the richest man in the tower to show up and thank her in person. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I did not know it was you," she said softly. "I know." His eyes drifted briefly over her small living space, and Harper felt heat rush to her cheeks. She hated how old the carpet looked, how chipped the paint was, how tiny everything felt with someone like him standing in the doorway. But he did not comment. He did not judge. If anything, he seemed careful not to look too long. That almost disarmed her more than anything else. "I came to ask about the system failure," he said. "There was something strange in the breakdown, and I need to understand exactly what you saw." Harper blinked at the urgency in his voice. She had expected him to be grateful, maybe polite, then leave. She had not expected him to need her. "You want my notes?" she asked. "I want your eyes." His words were simple, but they pressed into her chest with surprising force. Harper stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" She regretted the question the second it left her mouth. Why would a billionaire want to step into a cramped apartment with flickering lights? But Evan shook his head. "I do not want to make you uncomfortable. We can talk here." She almost laughed from relief, or nerves, or both. She tucked a stray curl behind her ear. "I can tell you everything," she said. "The leak, the sparks, the panel failures, the elevator overrides." Evan listened without interrupting. Not politely, not distantly. Fully, as if every detail mattered. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he took a card from his jacket and held it out to her. "Come to the tower today. 17th floor. Ask for me." Harper stared at the card, her fingers brushing his as she took it. A tiny shock ran up her arm. Evan's eyes flicked to hers the moment she felt it, and she looked away quickly. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you noticed what no one else did," he said. Then his voice softened in a way that felt almost unreal. "And because last night you did not see a billionaire or a stranger in the dark. You just saw someone who needed help." Before she could think of a response, he stepped back. Harper watched him walk down the hallway, his footsteps quiet but certain, until he disappeared around the corner, leaving the scent of rain and a rising storm of questions behind. On the card in her hand, his name gleamed. Evan Maxwell. And beneath it the words that would change everything. "I need your eyes on something." Harper stood in front of the Maxwell Dynamics Tower with the feeling that she had stepped into a life that did not belong to her. The glass building rose like a pillar of light against the Austin sky, all sharp angles and polished steel reflecting the morning sun like something carved out of a different world. People in tailored clothes streamed through the revolving doors, each one moving with purpose, speed, and the effortless confidence of those who never had to worry about rent or broken scooters or flickering apartment lights. Harper tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and clutched the access card Evan had given her. She kept telling herself it was not a mistake, that he genuinely wanted her here, that last night had not been some wild fever dream born out of fear and adrenaline. She inhaled slowly, then stepped through the front doors. Cool air washed over her instantly. The lobby looked like a museum of modern design filled with marble floors and living green walls and a reception desk that curved like a sculpture. Screens displayed data analytics and system maps. People spoke in low professional voices tapping on sleek tablets. Harper's scuffed sneakers squeaked against the floor. She winced. A woman at reception looked up, her eyes scanning Harper's clothes before softening slightly as if sensing that Harper did not belong to the usual crowd. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. Harper lifted the card Evan gave her. "I am here to see Mr. Maxwell." The receptionist straightened as though a silent alarm had gone off. "Of course. Please head to the elevator on the right. 17th floor." She handed Harper a visitor badge. Harper pinned it to her shirt and crossed the lobby, feeling eyes trail behind her, not unkindly but curious, puzzled, maybe even skeptical. People like her did not just walk in to see the CEO. She pressed the elevator button and waited. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The elevator was empty, spacious, lined with mirrored panels that reflected her from every angle. Harper stepped inside and pressed floor 17. The doors began to close. Then a voice said, "Hold the door." She turned just as a hand slipped through the gap. The doors reopened. Evan Maxwell stepped inside. The space instantly felt smaller, warmer, charged. He wore a charcoal gray suit today, crisp but not flashy, and his hair looked freshly combed, though still carrying that stubborn wave at the front that refused to stay in place. He pressed nothing. He already knew exactly where she was going. Their eyes met in the reflection first. Evan gave a small nod. "You made it." His voice, calm and low, wrapped around the small elevator like a quiet anchor. Harper swallowed. "I said I would. And you usually keep your word," he said. It was not a question. It felt like an observation, one that saw deeper than she expected. The elevator lifted smoothly, and for a moment the silence between them held its own tension, not awkward, not uncomfortable, just charged, as if the air itself was aware of the fact that two completely different worlds stood shoulder to shoulder in a metal box suspended high above the city. Harper tried not to stare, but the mirrors betrayed her. In every reflection, Evan stood near her, but not too near, close enough that she could feel the subtle warmth radiating from him, far enough that he left her space to breathe. She noticed small details she had missed before. The faint shadow under his eyes, like he had not slept properly in days. The way he kept one hand loosely in his pocket while the other held a folder, as if ready to shift into work mode at any second. The elevator hummed as numbers ticked upward. Harper tried to focus on the floor indicator, but caught Evan studying her reflection instead. She turned, slightly heart-fluttering. "What?" he asked softly. Harper blinked. "What? What?" "Something is on your mind. The way you keep shifting your weight?" She hesitated before speaking. "I just do not want to mess anything up. This place, your world, it is all so different from mine." Evan considered this for a moment. His expression softened in a way she had not expected. "It is different, but that is not a bad thing." He paused. "Last night you fixed a problem none of my senior engineers could detect. You saw something they did not even think to look for. That is why I asked you to come, not because of where you fit, but because of what you see." The elevator chimed. The door stayed closed for another heartbeat, as if giving her time to absorb his words. Harper found her voice. "I will do my best." Evan glanced at her again, something unreadable but strangely warm passing in his eyes. "You already are." The elevator finally opened. The 17th floor looked nothing like the lobby. This level was quieter, more private, filled with long glass corridors and rooms lined with blinking servers and digital control panels. Analysts moved quickly, whispering about system audits and cross-department metrics. A few glanced at Evan and straightened instantly. Some stared at Harper for a moment longer, their confusion obvious. Evan ignored all of them. He walked beside her as if she belonged at his side. Harper tried to keep up. "Why did you choose this floor?" she asked quietly. Evan tilted his head. "It is where the integrity systems are monitored, where last night's failure should have been detected before you had to risk yourself." Harper felt heat stir in her chest. "So this is where we start," she murmured. Evan nodded. "This is where you see what others missed." He guided her to a workstation with layered screen displays showing timestamps, logs, security pathways, and system pressure levels. Harper's eyes widened. The scale of it was beyond anything she had imagined. Multiple control grids intersected, forming a complex web of digital veins running through the entire building and beyond. She recognized some patterns, but others were new. She leaned closer. Something about the data felt off. Evan stepped beside her, watching her study the screens. Harper's heartbeat thudded more from his nearness than from the rows of digital code. Their reflections merged faintly in the glass ahead, as if the elevator had not fully released its hold on them. Harper pointed slowly. "Look at this. They missed a cross-connection from last night. It is small, but it should not be there." Evan leaned closer, their shoulders almost touching. The proximity sent a pulse of awareness down her spine. "You saw that instantly," he said quietly. Harper exhaled. "I guess I look differently." Evan's expression shifted in the reflection. "Not differently," he said. "Honestly." The moment stretched. Another unspoken beat between two people who should not have collided, but did. Then he straightened professional again. "Show me everything you notice." Harper nodded and drew a breath, ready to step into whatever this new world demanded of her. She did not know that this elevator ride, this strange closeness, this brief collision of two lives, would be the beginning of a connection that neither of them had expected, but both of them would soon be unable to walk away from. Harper stood in front of the glowing screens, the hum of the servers filling the quiet room like a steady breath, yet something in her chest felt unsteady as she traced the patterns across the data charts. The 17th floor was cooler than the lobby, quieter too, as if sound itself softened out of respect for the work done here. Evan stood beside her, arms folded loosely, watching her eyes move rather than the screens. Harper scrolled through the system logs from the previous night, the memories of sparks and flooded tiles still fresh enough that she could almost feel the cold water against her shoes again. She zoomed in on the timestamp corresponding to the collapse of the elevator connection, expecting a series of normal failure reports, but what she found instead made her pause. "Something is wrong," she murmured. Evan stepped closer. "What do you see?" Harper enlarged a section of data, isolating a thin line of code nestled between two routine updates. "This should not be here," she said. "It looks like a cross-connection call, but it was executed manually." Evan's expression sharpened. "Manually?" Harper nodded slowly. Someone entered a command that forced the system to reroute power right before the meltdown began. Evan leaned in, his eyes scanning the narrowed lines of text. His jaw tightened. "Can you confirm exactly what that command did?" Harper did not answer immediately. She retraced the digital pathway, following the breadcrumb trail like a thread hidden beneath layers of routine activity. She felt the rhythm of the data, the way a musician might feel a song, sensing when something was out of place. There she sat at last, pointing to a second line. The command redirected elevator power to a backup node that should not activate unless the main grid is offline, but the grid was still running. So whoever did this triggered a false overload and made the system think it was collapsing. Evan stood silent, his breath barely audible. "That would explain the blackout in the elevator," he said quietly. Harper felt her stomach knot. "Someone forced that crash on purpose," she whispered. Evan did not respond, but she felt the temperature in the room shift, as if the air itself sensed the tension coiling inside him. Harper clicked through another panel and froze. The same manual pattern appeared 3 nights earlier, and 5 nights before that. She zoomed in further. The commands shared an identical signature. Someone was testing the system over and over, waiting for the moment it would fail completely. Harper felt her heartbeat pick up as she whispered, "This is not a glitch. Someone inside the company is doing this." Evan's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw a spark of something sharply guarded behind his calm exterior. Not fear, exactly, but recognition. A quiet dread that suggested this was not the first time he had suspected betrayal. "Show me the access signature," he said. Harper highlighted the code, but the signature was scrambled. She frowned. "It is masked. That should not be possible on an internal network, unless someone with high-level clearance altered the framework from the inside," Evan finished. Harper looked up at him uncertainly. "How many people have that level of clearance?" Evan held her gaze without flinching. "Too many." His voice was low but steady. She could tell he was already spinning through possibilities, tightening every thread of logic inside his mind. Harper scrolled backward through earlier logs, and her breath caught. The masking pattern was too precise, too intentional. Someone was not just hiding their identity. They were creating a trail that would mislead anyone who checked casually. They wanted the system to look unreliable, Harper said. They wanted people to think it was failing on its own. Evan exhaled slowly, as if confirming a suspicion he had carried for a long time. "This is a red flag," he said. "A very dangerous one." Harper swallowed, feeling the weight of the discovery settle like cold stone in her stomach. "Why would someone inside your company do this?" Evan's gaze drifted to the far window where Austin's skyline shimmered beneath morning light. "Power," he said simply. "Control. Profit. There are always reasons." Harper tried to imagine the kind of person who would deliberately endanger thousands of people for an internal agenda, but the thought felt too heavy to understand. She clicked on another file set and her fingers froze. Someone had manually edited the logs to hide their failed attempt 2 nights earlier. Harper whispered, "They erased evidence." Evan stepped closer. His presence was grounding steady, different from the chaos she had experienced alone at 3 in the morning. But the truth in his voice cut through the air with quiet intensity. "This is not a technical attack, Harper. This is internal sabotage." Harper felt her pulse thrum. "So, what do we do?" Evan watched her for a long moment, not analyzing her like data but studying her like someone trying to understand why she was the one who noticed what no one else did. "You keep looking," he said, "and you tell me everything you find." Harper nodded, though her chest felt tight with a mix of fear and responsibility. She turned back to the screen and said softly, "Someone went through a lot of trouble to hide this. They will not stop now." Evan's expression darkened just slightly. "That is why I need you to keep your discovery private for now. Tell no one. Do not discuss it with any other employee." Harper swallowed. "You think they might target me? Only if they know what you found," he said. "So we will make sure they do not know." She looked at him, then really looked and saw more than a billionaire CEO. She saw a man carrying a storm beneath a composed exterior. A man who had learned to expect betrayal but was still choosing to trust her. Harper nodded slowly. "All right, I will help you find the truth." Evan held her gaze for another heartbeat before turning back to the data. The hum of servers filled the silence again, but the room no longer felt quiet. It felt like the beginning of something far more dangerous than an overnight system failure. Harper returned her focus to the screen, but her pulse drummed with the new reality unfolding between them. She had stepped into his world, and now there was no going back. Harper woke the next morning with a strange heaviness in her chest, the kind that warned her something was about to shift. When she arrived on the 17th floor, everything looked normal on the surface, but she felt it the moment she stepped into the open workspace. Conversation stopped. Chairs turned. A few glances lingered too long, the kind of silence that carried intention. Harper tried to steady her breathing as she walked to the Integrity Systems desk where she had worked beside Evan the previous day, but her badge beeped red against the reader. Access denied. That was odd. She tried again. Same red flash. That cold ripple of unease slid across her stomach. Before she could try a third time, a woman from the IT security team approached, arms crossed tightly. "You do not have access to this area." Harper frowned. "I did yesterday. Someone must have made a mistake." The woman raised a brow as if amused. "Mistake. Temporary workers do not get permanent access." Harper felt her cheeks warm but kept her voice calm. "I was asked by Mr. Maxwell to review system logs here. He requested my presence." A few heads turned at the name. Some whispered. The woman's expression shifted, but only slightly. Well, maybe he changed his mind. "I doubt that," Harper said, quietly. The woman stepped closer. "Then why would your access be removed overnight?" It was a question framed like a trap. Harper moved back, her pulse picking up. "I do not know, but I am sure there is a reasonable explanation." The woman smirked. "Reasonable. Right. Maybe do not overestimate your place here. You are just a contractor who got lucky being in the right place at the right time." The words stung more than Harper expected. She forced herself not to react. She walked toward the nearest available workstation to pull up the logs manually, but the system rejected her login. She tried again. Another rejection. Then a pop-up appeared. "Unauthorized user. Reported to supervisor." Harper's stomach plummeted. Someone had not only revoked her access but flagged her account as suspicious. She tried breathing through it. She reminded herself that Evan had asked her to keep things quiet, that he trusted her, that he was counting on her. But the room felt smaller with every passing second, as if the walls themselves were watching. 2 men from IT walked by, and one of them muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Heard she messed with the overnight backup. Probably tried to look important. The other one snickered. Guess she thought getting close to the boss would help her. Harper's throat tightened. She turned away, pretending she had not heard. but inside something folded in on itself. She had always known she did not belong to their world, but she had not expected the hostility to grow this quickly. She moved to the break room, hoping for a moment to breathe. Instead, she found two employees scrolling their phones with smirks on their faces. One of them whispered, "Is that her? The girl who caused the meltdown?" Harper stopped in the doorway. "That is not true," she said softly. One of the employees looked up with practiced pity. "Sorry, but that is what the memo said. The overnight meltdown occurred because someone accessed an unauthorized panel." Harper felt the color drain from her face. "That is not what happened." The employee shrugged. "Look, I do not know. Just be careful. HR is looking for you." Harper stepped out of the break room before her voice betrayed her. She walked down the hallway and leaned against the cool wall, trying to collect herself. The fear came slowly at first, then all at once. Someone wanted her gone. Someone wanted her silenced. Someone inside this tower had realized she discovered the truth. Her phone buzzed. An email from HR. "Please report to conference room 3 at your earliest convenience." Harper swallowed hard. The room felt like it shrank around her. She pushed off the wall and made her way toward conference room 3, each step heavier than the last. When she entered, the HR manager sat with two compliance officers. Their expressions were professionally blank. Harper Quinn, one of them, began. "We need to discuss your unauthorized activity in the basement 2 nights ago." Harper blinked. "Unauthorized? I was on call. I responded to a system meltdown alert." The HR manager tilted her head. "According to our records, no meltdown was detected." Harper stared at her. "That is not possible. I was there. The system was malfunctioning. The elevator was offline. I helped someone stuck inside." One of the compliance officers exchanged a glance with the other. "Can you identify this person?" Harper hesitated. She could not mention Evan without his permission. "I do not know his name," she said carefully. The room went still. The HR manager pressed a folder closed. "You understand how this looks, Harper. You accessed areas you were not authorized to. You interfered with critical systems." Harper felt her pulse hammer. "That is not what happened," she said quietly. The compliance officer leaned forward. "Then what happened?" Harper opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Anything she said would confirm she was somewhere she should not have been. Anything she said without Evan present would only tighten their suspicion. "I cannot explain everything yet," she said softly, "but I can explain it to Mr. Maxwell." The HR manager's expression tightened ever so slightly. "He is not available." Harper felt something in her chest sink. They were trying to erase her. They were trying to crush her credibility before she could reveal what she found. She stepped back from the table. "I did nothing wrong." Her voice shook but did not break. "I followed the system alarms. I helped someone who was trapped. I fixed a failure that none of your systems detected." The HR manager sighed. "We will review your file and get back to you. For now, please refrain from accessing any company network or equipment." Harper walked out of the room, unable to breathe. She found a quiet corner by a window and sank onto the small bench. She tried to steady herself, but her eyes burned. She swallowed hard, refusing to let the tears fall. Through the glass, she saw a reflection. Evan. He stood in the hallway, several feet away, watching her with an expression no one else in this building had given her all morning. Not judgment, not suspicion. Something closer to concern. He stayed where he was, unseen by everyone except her, as if he was measuring the scene unfolding, identifying which parts were lies and which were traps designed to crush her voice. He did not step forward, not yet. But in that moment, Harper understood something important. She was being targeted because she saw the truth, and someone in this building wanted to make sure she would never be seen again. Harper avoided the 17th floor for the rest of the day. Every department she walked through felt colder than usual, as if the building itself could sense the pressure tightening around her. People whispered when she passed. Some did not bother to lower their voices. Others looked at her with the kind of curiosity reserved for someone who had already been judged guilty. She tried to focus on smaller tasks, things nobody would notice if she completed perfectly, but her hands shook every time she touched a keyboard. She checked her email, often hoping for a message from Evan that would make sense of everything, but nothing came. The silence was its own kind of warning. When her shift finally ended, she left the tower, quickly hugging her jacket close as the evening wind swept across the empty parking lot. Austin glowed in the distance, neon lights reflecting on the river as if the city had never known the kind of heaviness she felt now. She walked toward the bus stop, each step echoing the doubt she tried so hard to silence. Maybe she should not have come back today. Maybe she should have kept quiet about the red flag. Maybe she was in over her head. The bus was late. Harper sat on the bench and rubbed her hands together. Her eyes drifted to the Maxwell Tower looming behind her. Somewhere inside that building, someone saw her as a threat, and yet the one person she needed to hear from had not said a single word. Harper looked down at her shoes until the soft crunch of footsteps approached. She knew who it was before she raised her head. Evan stood a few feet away, the wind tugging at the edges of his coat, the fading sunlight drawing a faint gold line across his profile. He did not speak right away. He simply watched her with a kind of quiet gravity that made her chest thud. "You left early," he said gently. His voice carried none of the distance she had heard earlier in the day. Harper nodded. "I had to. Things were getting unpredictable." Evan sat beside her, leaving just enough space to be respectful, though the bench felt smaller the moment he settled. "Who talked to you?" he asked. "HR." She said softly. "And security. They said the meltdown was my fault." Evan's jaw shifted. "That is not true. I know it is not, but they are trying to convince everyone otherwise." Evan looked straight ahead, his voice low. "There is a reason I told you to keep what you discovered between us. Someone inside the company is scared of being exposed. They will push back hard." Harper clenched her hands in her lap. "They took my access. They are making it look like I caused the entire failure. People think I am manipulating you." Evan turned to her. Then his eyes steady. "You and I both know that is not what happened. That does not matter to them," she whispered. "They want to erase me." He exhaled slowly. "Not if I can stop it." Harper studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the quiet storm behind his eyes. She hesitated. "Why did you not step in earlier?" Evan blinked once, the truth flickering across his face before he spoke. "Because I needed to know who was involved before making a move. If I approach too soon, they will hide deeper. If I approach too late," he stopped, letting the words hang in the air. Harper understood. He was playing a larger game than she could see. But that did not erase the loneliness she felt today. "I did not know," he continued quietly, "that they would target you so fast." Harper looked down, her voice fragile. "It is fine. I am used to being overlooked." Evan's tone sharpened just slightly. "I am not talking about being overlooked, Harper. I am talking about being pushed out of the truth." She lifted her gaze and found him studying her in a way that made her throat tighten. He stood. "Come with me." Harper hesitated. "Where are we going?" Evan offered his hand but did not touch her. "Just upstairs, somewhere private." She followed him back inside the tower, the lobby colder now under the evening lights. They took an elevator to the rooftop access level. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space she had never seen before. A wide terrace overlooking the city, lined with soft lights that flickered like stars fallen to railing height. The night wind brushed against them, carrying a quiet that made the entire city feel far away. Evan walked to the edge and rested his hands on the railing. Harper stood beside him, unsure what to say. After a long moment, he spoke. 5 years ago, my brother died because of a system failure." Harper felt the air shift. She turned toward him slowly. "I did not know. Most people do not. The company covered it up at the time. Said it was random. Said nothing could have prevented it." Evan's voice lowered. "But I knew." Harper waited. Evan's eyes were on the skyline, but his voice belonged to a much smaller, more painful memory. My brother was trapped in an automated warehouse elevator when the lift sensors glitched. He called security 3 times. They never responded. Their system froze. No one saw the alerts. Harper's breath caught. Evan drew in a tight breath. By the time they reached him, he was already gone. She felt the ache of his words settle inside her. Evan continued quietly. I bought the company after that, rebuilt its entire infrastructure, not because I wanted power, but because I refused to let anyone else vanish inside a failure that should have been preventable. Harper's voice was soft. And now it is happening again. Evan nodded. The same types of warnings, the same patterns in the logs, and someone is trying to bury it. She felt anger rise inside her, not for herself, but for what he carried alone. She stepped closer. You rebuilt everything to prevent what happened to him. You did not fail Evan. Someone else is trying to break what you fixed. Evan turned his head slightly as if her words had reached a part of him he thought was locked away. You saw what others did not, he said. Not because it was your job, because you cared. Harper felt her chest tighten. It surprised her how much it meant to hear that. Evan exhaled. I have not trusted many people in years. People take advantage of trust at this level. They twist it. They weaponize it. Harper swallowed. And you trust me? Evan looked at her, really looked, his gaze steady and unguarded. Yes, Harper, I do. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, warm electric. The city lights stretched beneath them like constellations, and for a moment she felt the weight of every unspoken thing between them. Evan looked away, first grounding himself. We will expose the truth, but not alone. Harper nodded. I am with you. She saw something shift in his expression, something that made her heart stutter. Not gratitude, not relief. Something more fragile, more human. Thank you, Harper, he said quietly. For last night, for today, for seeing what others missed. She did not know how to respond. So she stood beside him on the rooftop, letting the wind wrap around them as the distance between their two worlds quietly, unmistakably began to close. Harper returned to work the next morning with little sleep and even less certainty. The rooftop conversation replayed in her mind over and over, the way some moments do when they become thresholds. She was walking into a building that had decided she did not belong, yet the one person who owned the entire tower had looked at her last night as if she was the only person he trusted. That contradiction made it hard to breathe. The lobby buzzed with the usual morning wave of polished professionals, but Harper felt the undercurrent of tension as she walked toward security. Her badge still carried restricted access. She wondered how long that would last. She wondered who was watching her now. She reached her temporary workstation on the 15th floor, hoping to stay unnoticed long enough to run a few tests. But 10 minutes into scanning the new logs, she felt a presence behind her. Not hostile. Familiar. Evan stood there holding a tablet dressed impeccably, yet his eyes carried shadows from a night of little rest. Harper straightened instinctively. I thought you were in back-to-back meetings, she whispered. I was. I left them. The honesty in his tone startled her. He held out the tablet. The overnight security logs. They found inconsistencies again. Multiple access attempts to the server room. Harper felt a jolt. They are trying to trigger another failure. Evan nodded grimly. Or blame another one on you. She stood quickly. Let me see. Evan's voice softened. Not here. Come with me. They walked side by side down a quiet hallway to one of the smaller glass-walled conference rooms. Evan closed the door behind them. The moment it clicked shut, the tension in the air doubled. The room seemed too quiet, too still. Harper moved toward the table, scrolling through the logs, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the patterns. She spoke mostly to herself. These entries were planted. The timestamps are manipulated. They want to prove I accessed the panels without authorization again. Evan watched her across the table, his expression tightening as he saw how fast she pieced things together. He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the quiet heat radiating off him. "You are good at this," he murmured. "Not just competent, not just skilled. Good." Harper kept her focus on the logs, but her pulse spiked. "I just see things people overlook," she said. Evan's tone dropped lower. "That is not a small thing." She risked a glance at him and found him closer than before, studying her with an intensity that was not intimidating, but searching. As if he was trying to understand how someone like her had stepped into his world without flinching. Harper cleared her throat and looked away. "The logs point to an inside job," she said softly. "Someone with high-level clearance." Evan nodded. "That matches what I found last night." Harper looked up sharply. "Last night." He hesitated, then admitted quietly, "I barely slept. I kept thinking about what could have happened to you in that locked server room." The admission hit her harder than she expected. Her voice softened. "I am okay." Evan looked at her with an expression that suggested being okay was not enough for him. Harper set the tablet down. "You cannot take the entire investigation on yourself. Not like last time. You will burn out." Evan's jaw tensed. "I am trying to protect the company and the truth." "And you," he added before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air. Harper's breath caught. He looked away for the first time as if he had revealed something too raw. "I mean, you should not have been dragged into this. I feel responsible." Harper stepped closer. "You are not responsible for their actions. You did not choose the sabotage." He finally met her eyes again, and what she saw made her chest ache. Guilt, fear, the burden of carrying too much alone. She reached out without thinking and laid her hand on the edge of the table near his. Her voice was calm but sure. "Not everyone is your enemy, Evan. Do not lose yourself trying to fight battles alone." Evan stared at her hand and then at her, his expression shifting in real time. Her kindness was not pity. It was grounding. It was steady. It was something he had forgotten could exist in a world full of power plays and hidden knives. Slowly, he placed his hand flat on the table, inches from hers, not touching, but close enough that the quiet warmth between them thickened the air. The room seemed smaller, the lighting softer. Harper felt something spark low in her chest, mild but undeniable. He exhaled in a way that sounded like he had been holding his breath for years. "You are the first person in a long time who has asked me to be careful with myself," he said quietly. Harper swallowed. "You deserve someone to say that." His eyes never left hers. "And you deserve not to be punished for doing the right thing." Their silence was not empty. It was full of two lives brushing against each other for the first time without walls. Then Evan's phone vibrated, breaking the moment. He checked it, and his expression darkened. Another attempt to access the core files, he said. Harper felt a surge of adrenaline. "We have to catch them." Evan stepped forward impulsively. "Harper!" His voice carried urgency she could not quite name. "Stay close to me today. I do not want you alone anywhere in this building." The protective edge in his tone sent a shiver through her. She nodded quietly. Evan hesitated for a moment longer as if wanting to say something he did not dare. Then he turned toward the door. Harper followed. As they stepped back into the hallway, people watched them with thinly veiled judgment and speculation. But Evan did not look at any of them. His attention stayed on her, a subtle but unmistakable shift in power. They walked through the tower like two people moving in the same direction now, not by accident, but by choice. Something had changed. Not because of fear, not because of pressure, but because kindness offered at the right moment had altered the course of power itself. And neither of them could pretend they did not feel it. Harper returned to the lower levels of the tower with Evan, their footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor as they approached the restricted server wing. The chilled air humming from the vent above felt unnatural, too cold for a floor that usually ran warm from all the equipment. Harper sensed immediately that something was wrong. She scanned her badge out of instinct even though she knew it would not work. The reader blinked yellow for half a second, then flashed green. Green. Evan froze. Harper stared. Someone restored her access. Not out of fairness, not out of justice, out of intent. Evan stepped forward sharply. "This is not right." Harper leaned closer to the reader. "My credentials were revoked yesterday. There is no reason for them to be reinstated overnight unless someone wanted me to enter." Evan's jaw tensed. "They want you in there." Harper felt a chill spread down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold air. She touched the door handle gently. The metal felt too warm beneath her palm. Evan noticed instantly. "Step back." He opened the door himself, slowly, cautiously. The room beyond was dimly lit. Too dim. Multiple overhead lights were powered off. Only the emergency strips along the floor flickered with faint illumination. Harper's footsteps were soundless as she stepped inside. Something in the air felt thick, as if the room was holding its breath. She walked toward the central panel, scanning for the place where the logs had been manipulated the night before. Evan stayed close behind her, his presence steady and grounding. Harper bent down to examine the wiring cluster beneath the console. Someone had opened it. She could see the screws resting on the floor. She pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and aimed it toward the inner housing. Evan crouched beside her. "Do you see anything?" She nodded slowly. "The heat sinks are offline." "That should not be possible." Evan frowned. "They were working yesterday. Someone disabled them," he realized. Harper whispered, "Evan, if the heat sinks are offline." Her flashlight drifted further inward, and saw it. The temperature sensors were manually bypassed. The fans were locked at minimal speed. Harper felt her breath catch. They were transforming the server room itself into a trap. Evan stood abruptly. "We need to get out of here. They know you will check this panel." Harper reached toward the wiring, hoping to pull one more log, just one more clue that could expose the saboteur. But the moment her fingers touched the panel casing, the emergency lights flickered, then died. The entire room went dark. A heavy metallic sound reverberated through the hallway. Evan cursed under his breath. That was the door. Harper turned toward the entrance, though she could see nothing but shadows. She ran toward it, hands pressed against the metal. It did not budge. She pounded harder. Still locked, her pulse raced. They locked me in again. Evan grabbed the door handle and pulled with all his strength. Nothing moved. The room suddenly felt hotter, much hotter. Van swore again. They shut off the cooling system. Harper felt a surge of panic rise against her ribs. The temperature climbed fast as the server racks began humming aggressively, their internal components generating heat with no ventilation. Evan moved toward her, voice firm, even through the dim. "Harper, stay close to the ground. It will be cooler there." She crouched, breathing through the rising wave of heat sweat already forming at her hairline. Evan pulled his phone from his pocket, but the signal icon was dead. No service. Harper heard something faint, a soft crackling sound. The servers were overheating. If they reached critical temperature, the safety shutoff would activate, but with the cooling disabled and the override in place, there was no guarantee the failsafe would respond. The air grew thicker. Harper's lungs tightened. Evan took off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders, shielding her from the worst of the heat. He crouched beside her, his hand steady on her back. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Breathe." Harper tried, but the heat pressed against her chest like a weight. She wiped sweat from her forehead with trembling fingers. "Someone wants to blame this meltdown on me," she choked out. Evan's voice hardened. "They will not. I will not let them," she coughed. Evan looked up, scanning the shadows. "There should be a manual release panel in the maintenance alcove, but it is on the other side of the room," and the heat was rising fast. He stood. "Stay here." Harper grabbed his wrist. "You cannot go alone." Evan looked down at her, eyes sharp with something fierce. "I am not leaving you, Harper. I am opening that door." He stepped into the heat, navigating the narrow space between server racks. Harper followed, despite his warning, refusing to leave him in the stifling darkness. The closer they moved to the alcove, the louder the crackling became. Harper stumbled once, lightheaded, bracing herself against the rack. Evan rushed back. "Harper!" She shook her head. "I am fine." He looked unconvinced, but helped her stand. They reached the alcove. Evan ripped open the access panel. Sparks flickered. Someone had cut the manual wires. Evan swore. Harper felt the room spinning. The heat was unbearable now. Evan pressed his hand against the emergency release mechanism and pulled. Nothing. He pulled again, his muscles strained with the effort. On the third pull, something snapped inside the door. A small click echoed through the chamber. The door's internal lock disengaged. Evan grabbed Harper's hand. "Move." She stumbled and he lifted her easily, guiding her toward the faint strip of light now seeping from the doorway. The moment they crossed the threshold, the cool hall air hit her like a shock. Evan carried her a few more steps until her breathing steadied. He lowered her gently, his hands cupping her face as he checked her gaze. "Harper, are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her voice trembled. "They tried to kill me." Evan's expression darkened with a depth she had not seen before. He pulled her into his chest with one arm, his voice low and rough against her hair. "They will not touch you again." Harper clung to his shirt, the reality sinking in. This was no longer sabotage. This was violence. Intentional. Targeted. Evan kept holding her until her breathing slowed, one hand steady on her back, the other gripping the side of her waist as if anchoring her. When she finally pulled back, their eyes locked. Evan said in a voice that carried zero doubt, "We are going to end this, together." She nodded, still shaken but certain of one thing. She was not alone anymore. Harper sat on the cool hallway floor for several minutes until the dizziness eased, but the shock stayed with her like a pulse beneath her skin. The air outside the server room felt thin compared to the heat that had pressed against her lungs moments earlier. Evan stayed in front of her, one hand braced beside her on the floor, the other hovering near her shoulder as though he needed to keep physical contact without overwhelming her. Harper looked up slowly. Her voice was barely steady. "Someone tried to trap me in there twice." Evan nodded once, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "Yes. And now we know exactly why." He stood and helped her to her feet. Harper leaned gently against the wall, grounding herself. "Why are they so desperate?" Evan's eyes hardened. "Because you found what they needed hidden, and you found it before they could erase it." Harper swallowed, remembering the altered logs, the missing timestamps, the buried patterns. "You think the sabotage connects to your brother's case?" Evan nodded slowly. "It is bigger than that. For years, the leadership team insisted the warehouse glitch was a one-off tragedy. They claimed no one ignored warnings. But when you discovered the red flag in the system last week, it matched the same signature." Harper felt her heart lurch. "So they covered it before, and now someone is trying to recreate the same failure pattern." Evan looked at her with a kind of heaviness that was not defeat, but clarity. "Whoever is behind this wants full control of the infrastructure system. If they succeed, I lose decision power. The board shifts. And I lose the ability to protect this company from being gutted from the inside." Harper felt a rush of anger. "So they targeted employees before, and now they are targeting you and me." Evan's gaze softened a fraction. "They targeted you because you saw the truth before anyone else." Harper pressed her fingers into her palms, steadying herself. "Then we exposed them." Evan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That is exactly what we will do, but we do it right. Together." They walked toward the executive elevator, Evan punching in a private code Harper had not seen before. The car opened to a quieter, dimmer hallway with thick glass doors leading into a private suite. Harper froze at the threshold. "Are we allowed in here?" Evan glanced at her. "I want you where I can keep you safe." She followed him into his private office, which overlooked the entire Austin skyline. Tall windows cast long strips of gold across the floor as the sun dipped low. Harper took everything in with quiet awe. The shelves of cleanly arranged documents, the large digital boards showing live infrastructure graphs, and a small framed photo on the desk of Evan with his younger brother smiling, unaware of how fragile time was. Evan walked to the largest monitor and pulled up a secured folder. "You need to see this," he said, gesturing her closer. Harper approached the screens, reflecting across her eyes. Evan opened an archived set of logs. "These are from the night my brother died. Harper scanned them carefully, noticing similar irregularities. The warnings appeared then vanished. Someone manually interfered with the alert system, Harper whispered. Someone caused the failure. Evan nodded, or at least allowed it. For profit, influence, leverage. Harper felt anger build in her chest, and they are doing it again. Evan clicked to overlay two sets of data, his brother's failure pattern and the recent sabotage attempts. The match was undeniable. Harper exhaled shakily. They built the exact same pattern. Evan looked at her. That is why you are in danger, because you found the copy before they executed the final step. Harper shook her head. I do not care about the danger, I care about the truth. Evan watched her for a long moment, something new stirring in his gaze. Admiration, respect, something deeper he did not name. Then comes the part we cannot avoid, he said softly. Harper looked up. What part? Evan hesitated. The person who executed both patterns. It is someone with the highest access, someone I once trusted. Harper's breath slowed. Who? Evan pulled up one more file. The screen displayed a name she recognized. Christopher Lang, the CFO. Evan nodded, his expression carrying the weight of years of denial now turned to clarity. He was my closest advisor. My brother trusted him. I trusted him. Harper felt the betrayal hit her like a cold shock. He is the one who tried to trap me. Evan nodded. And the one who tried to shut you out of the investigation. Harper felt a wave of heat rise again, this time from anger rather than danger. Then we need to take him down. Evan looked almost surprised by the fire in her voice, but then he nodded slowly. Yes, but not without undeniable evidence. Harper turned back to the screen and scrolled deeper. There is always a trail, she murmured. Evan watched her move through the data with sharp precision. He stood close enough that she felt the faint warmth of him behind her but did not crowd her. His voice was low. I can pull board-level access logs, but you need to verify the patterns. You are the only one who can close the gaps. Harper nodded. Show me everything. Evan hesitated for a moment, then unlocked a folder marked Confidential Executive Tier. Harper sat at the desk and began analyzing the entries. The more she scrolled, the clearer it became. The CFO had been manipulating systems for months, redirecting failures, disabling alerts, and planning a takeover through orchestrated chaos. Harper lifted her head. He is going to trigger another failure, a big one. Evan's expression darkened. The quarterly audit is in 48 hours. If the systems crash during that review, the board will shift power immediately. Harper looked at him with fierce determination. Then we only have 2 days to stop him. Silence filled the office. Not empty, not fearful, focused. Evan lowered himself into the chair beside her. Harper, you understand what this means. She met his gaze without flinching. It means we stand together. Evan's breath stilled for a moment. She said it so simply, so certainly, as if her loyalty was not a burden but a choice she made with clarity. He nodded once. Then, that is exactly what we do. Harper straightened. We gather the logs, we map the access, we track the pattern timeline. Evan added. And when we confront the board, we do it side by side. Harper said softly, I am not afraid. Evan's voice dropped. I am afraid of losing you. Harper's chest tightened, but she held his gaze. You will not. Not in this, not now. He let out a slow breath, something easing inside him. Then let us begin. They turned to the screens like 2 points of light aligning. Each log, each timestamp, each line of truth. For the first time since the sabotage began, Harper did not feel alone, and Evan did not feel the crushing weight of responsibility pressing him to the edge. They were in this together now, not by accident, by choice. The boardroom of Maxwell Dynamics was designed to intimidate. Frosted walls, a 30-foot glass table, 12 leather chairs positioned like a tribunal. It was a room built for power battles measured in silence rather than shouting, and today every seat was filled. Harper stood just outside the doorway with her hands clasped tightly, trying to steady the thundering rhythm inside her chest. Evan stood beside her, tall and still, the quiet center of gravity in a storm only he understood. He looked down at her gently. "Are you ready?" Harper nodded, even though she did not feel ready at all, but she also knew ready was not the point. Courage was. Evan placed his hand at the small of her back, guiding her inside. The entire room turned. 12 pairs of eyes locked on them, some curious, some skeptical, one pair furious. Christopher Lang sat near the head of the table, expression cool and rehearsed. He leaned back as if watching a performance he had already predicted. Evan spoke, first voice calm, but edged with iron. "We are here to address the infrastructure failures, the sabotage, and the attempted cover-up." A murmur moved across the table. Christopher stood slowly, spreading his hands as if attempting diplomacy. "Evan, this is unnecessary. The audit is in 48 hours. There is no need to create panic." Harper felt her spine tighten. Evan did not look at him. "Harper, show them." The room shifted again as Evan stepped aside and gave Harper the central position. She swallowed hard and tapped the console. The screens behind her lit up with system patterns, log comparisons, and the unmistakable identical failure signatures matching the night Evan's brother died. The board leaned forward. Christopher's jaw ticked. Harper's voice was quiet at first, but steady. The red flag patterns were not accidents. They were manually inserted into the system, and someone tried to bury them by locking me inside a server room twice. Several board members gasped. Christopher's eyes narrowed with feigned concern. "That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof you were locked in?" Harper held his gaze. "I was there." Christopher gave a thin smile. "Personal experience is not evidence." The room grew tense. Harper forced herself to breathe. Then she switched the screen. The logs shifted to show the access trail, a clear timeline. "A digital fingerprint," Harper said quietly. "The only person with privileges high enough to alter the warehouse logs 5 years ago is the same person who altered the logs this week." The room froze. Christopher's mask cracked. "Even by a fraction." Evan's voice was low. "Harper, tell them who." She met Christopher's eyes and spoke the truth that had nearly cost her her life. "Christopher Lang, CFO. You bypassed system controls, you buried failures, you engineered another collapse to seize control during the audit." The board erupted into overlapping voices. Shock, accusations, fear. Christopher slammed his palm onto the table. "This is outrageous. You brought in an outsider, a temp worker, and you expect us to believe her." Harper felt every eye swing back to her. The weight was crushing. Christopher stepped closer, voice rising. "She is nothing more than a contract employee, a nobody from a basement floor, someone trying to make herself important." Harper felt her throat close. He wanted to humiliate her publicly, reduce her, erase her, again. And maybe she would have broken under the pressure if Evan had stayed silent like everyone else expected. But he did not. Evan moved. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but with enough force that his chair scraped the floor as he rose. He walked until he stood directly between Harper and the man trying to destroy her. "Christopher," he said, voice sharp as steel, "if you speak about her like that again, you will be removed from this room." Christopher scoffed. "Oh. So, we are defending the temp worker now." Evan stepped closer, taller, colder. "Not defending, correcting." Christopher laughed. "You cannot be serious. You are choosing her word over mine." Evan's voice dropped into a level that silenced the entire room. "Yes, I am." The boardroom fell completely still. Harper stared at Evan, breath caught in her chest. She had prepared for data battles, for technical defenses, for verbal attacks. But she was not prepared for the moment a billionaire CEO stood in front of her like a shield. Evan faced the board. "If you fire her, you fire me." Gasps filled the room. Pure, stunned disbelief. Harper's knees nearly gave out. Evan pressed on unfazed. Harper Quinn uncovered the truth. She prevented the collapse of the system. She risked her life to protect this company, and not one person in this room has done more than she has in the last 72 hours. Christopher tried to interrupt. Evan cut him off. "Sit down, Christopher." Christopher's composure shattered for a second. Evan turned back to the board. "You want proof?" he asked. "Here it is." He tapped the console. Another screen appeared showing video timestamps of Christopher entering restricted floors at times he claimed to be off-site. The board leaned in. One member whispered, "That is impossible," Evan said. "Not impossible. Not when you have the right clearance level." The room erupted with outrage and disbelief. Christopher tried to step forward, but two board members blocked him. He glared at Harper with a cold fury that made her stomach twist. Evan noticed and moved subtly closer to her. The chairman finally spoke. "Evan, what are you proposing?" Evan looked around the table slowly, deliberately. Full removal of Christopher Lang from his position effective immediately, and a criminal investigation into the sabotage patterns. The board exchanged looks shaken. Then another member spoke. "And the contractor." Evan turned. Harper stood frozen, her hands trembling. "They want to know if she stays." Evan's voice softened, but his words carried enough power to shake the room. "She stays, as long as she wants." The room fell silent again. Not hostile, not doubtful, silent with recognition. The dynamic had shifted, not because Harper fought for herself, but because Evan made a choice. A public choice. The kind a man could not take back. Harper felt her chest tighten with something she could not name. Gratitude. Awe. Something deeper. Evan turned slightly toward her. "You do not have to speak," he murmured. "I will take it from here." She nodded, breath unsteady. The board members whispered among themselves, and one by one agreed to suspend Christopher pending investigation. When the meeting ended, Evan placed a steady hand behind Harper's back as he guided her out of the room. He leaned closer and whispered, his breath warm near her ear. "I meant every word in there." Harper looked at him stunned. "You put your position on the line. For me." Evan held her gaze unflinching. "For the truth. And, yes, for you." The morning of the press conference arrived with a sky the color of steel, the kind of muted gray that made the entire city feel like it was holding its breath. Harper stood behind the tall curtains at the edge of the atrium, trying to convince her heart not to beat out of her chest. Rows of cameras were pointed at the podium. Journalists flooded the space, murmuring, whispering, speculating. Maxwell Dynamics had not held a press conference in over a year. And today, the CEO was addressing the nation about the sabotage scandal that threatened to tear the company apart. Harper tugged nervously at the hem of her blazer, her palms damp. She should not even be here. She was not an executive or a specialist or anyone who belonged on a broadcast watched by millions. She was the girl from the basement floor. The girl who was supposed to disappear. But Evan had insisted. "You stand with me," he had said that morning. "Not behind me, not hidden, beside me." Harper still was not sure she had the strength to do that. She peeked through the curtain and saw Evan speaking quietly to the event coordinator. His suit was sharp, his posture calm. But there was something raw in his expression, something the cameras would not catch, but she could see from here. The last 72 hours had taken a toll on him, but he stood there anyway, steady as a pillar. The coordinator whispered something. Evan nodded. Then he turned. His eyes found Harper instantly, as if he had been looking for only one person in the room the entire time. He walked toward her, each step measured, intentional. Harper felt her breath waver. When he reached her, he spoke softly so only she could hear. "How are you holding up?" She forced a small laugh. "Nervous?" "Very." Evan's gaze softened. "You were almost killed 3 days ago, and you are still here. That alone makes you braver than anyone in that room." Harper looked down her throat, tightening. She did not feel brave. She felt entirely exposed. Evan lifted his hand but stopped before touching her, giving her just enough room to retreat if she needed. "May I?" he asked quietly. Harper nodded. Evan brushed his fingers gently against the back of her arm, grounding her without overwhelming her. You are not alone. Harper, not today, not ever again. The words steadied her more than she cared to admit. She looked up at him. Why does this part feel scarier than the server room? Evan smiled faintly. Because truth in front of cameras is harder than truth in the dark. But we do it together, he added. Together. That word struck something deep inside her. Before she could respond, the coordinator called out, Mr. Maxwell, we are live in 90 seconds. Evan exhaled once, then turned fully to Harper. I will give my statement first, he said. Then I will bring you up. Harper blinked. Bring me up? In front of everyone? Yes. Harper swallowed. Why? Evan's gaze did not waver. 'Cause you deserve the world to know the truth, and because I am done letting them decide your worth. Her breath caught. Evan stepped closer. When I speak out there, I am not just addressing them, I am defending you. Publicly. Harper's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do that for me? Evan's answer came without hesitation. Because you matter. He turned toward the stage before she could respond, leaving her fighting back a rush of emotion she did not expect. The countdown started. 10, 9, reporters adjusted microphones. 8, 7, cameras locked in. 6, 5, the room fell utterly silent. 4, 3, 2, 1. Evan stepped onto the stage. The lights hit him with full force. He looked every bit the Billionaire CEO, but something about him felt different today. Realer. Human. The room leaned forward as he spoke. Thank you for being here. The last 72 hours have revealed critical failures in our infrastructure system. The crowd murmured. Evan continued. These were not accidents. They were deliberate acts of sabotage intended to destabilize this company and place thousands of lives at risk. Several reporters gasped. Evan's voice remained calm but carried the weight of truth. 5 years ago, my brother died due to a system failure that should have never happened. This past week, we discovered identical patterns reappearing, and they were not caused by machine error. They were engineered by someone in a position of power. Cameras flashed. Evan glanced briefly at the board seated off to the side. Christopher Lang has been removed pending investigation, but that is not the story that matters most today. The atrium grew even quieter. Evan's voice lowered. The person who uncovered the sabotage. The person who risked her life to expose what others tried to bury. The person without whom none of us would even be standing safely here, right now, is a woman who does not hold an executive title, does not sit in these meetings, does not come from privilege or influence, a woman none of you have ever heard of. Harper felt the world tilt. Reporters whispered to each other. Who? Who is he talking about? Evan turned to the curtain and extended a hand. Miss Harper Quinn, please join me. Harper's breath stopped. Her feet refused to move. Then Evan held out his hand more firmly. Everything in his posture saying, I am here. Come stand with me. Harper stepped out. The cameras erupted. Flash after flash. She blinked against the brightness. She walked toward Evan in small controlled steps. When she reached him, he placed a steadying hand at the back of her arm, guiding her gently to his side. Not behind him, not off stage, right next to him. Evan faced the reporters. This woman saved thousands of people 2 nights ago. She discovered what my own leadership team missed. She was nearly killed twice because she refused to stay silent. The air vibrated with tension. Harper felt her heart in her throat. Evan continued, If you want a hero to headline your stories today, do not look at me. Look at her. Harper felt heat flood her face. She shook her head slightly overwhelmed. Evan did not look away. He spoke louder this time, his voice carrying both pride and something far deeper. Harper Quinn is the reason this company stands today, and she is the person I choose to listen to, always. Reporters instantly raised their hands, shouting questions. A woman called out, Mr. Maxwell, are you saying this contractor has more authority than your board? Evan answered without hesitation. She has more integrity than most executives I have ever met. Another shouted, Why is she here at your side?" Evan turned to Harper, then back to the crowd. "Because I want the world to know exactly who stood with me when everything broke." Harper's breath hitched. She felt the emotion swell inside her like a tide she could not stop. Evan's voice softened, though the microphones carried every word. "And because I choose her, publicly." The room erupted. Journalists' whisper shouted theories. Cameras clicked like rain against glass. Harper stared at Evan, stunned. Her chest tightened with something she had no name for. Evan leaned closer, lowering his voice just for her. "You do not have to say anything," he murmured. "Just stand with me." She nodded because she could not speak. Her throat was too full. He guided her gently as the reporters continued their questions. They asked how she discovered the logs, how she survived the server room, how she felt about being recognized publicly. And every time she faltered, Evan stepped in steady as a shield, but careful not to answer for her. When she finally found her voice, she said quietly, "I just did what anyone should do when something is wrong." Evan corrected softly, "Not anyone. Harper, you." She looked at him, eyes burning. He held her gaze without looking away, not once. And the world saw it. They saw the way he looked at her, the way he stood with her, the way he chose her, not as a publicity token, not as an employee, as someone whose truth mattered, someone who mattered to him. When the conference ended, the noise collapsed into a hum as the cameras powered down. Evan placed a hand on Harper's back and guided her gently toward the side exit away from the crowds. The moment the door closed behind them and the noise dimmed, Harper finally let out the breath she had been holding. Evan turned to her. "Harper," his voice was low, careful. She looked up. "You meant all of that," she whispered. "Every single word." He nodded slowly. "I meant more than I said." Harper felt something inside her shift. Not confusion, not fear. Something warm, something possible. Evan reached for her hand, stopped, and then waited, giving her the choice. She hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers like an anchor, not overwhelming, just steady. "True?" Evan exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Harper. Today was not strategy, it was truth. She held his hand tighter. "I know." And for the first time since the night she stepped into the flooded basement at 3 a.m, Harper felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Safe, seen, and chosen. 1 year later, the city of Austin shimmered in the soft light of early spring, the skyline reflecting the kind of warmth that came after storms that once threatened to tear everything apart. Harper stood in the center of her new office high above the river, a space she still could not believe belonged to her. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the room, letting in golden morning light. The view was breathtaking, a wide, unbroken horizon that stretched over the city she once biked through on cold nights just to make ends meet. She touched the edge of her desk, still not used to how polished everything was. Head of Integrity Systems, a title she never imagined. A position she had earned through fire rather than ambition. She walked to the window, her reflection faint against the glass. Same face, same quiet girl, but something inside her had changed. She stood straighter. She breathed easier. She no longer apologized for taking up space. A soft tap sounded behind her. She turned. Evan leaned casually against the doorframe, wearing a light gray suit that contrasted with the warmth in his eyes. His presence still did something to the air around her, a subtle tightening followed by a strange sense of calm. He smiled, admiring the view again. Harper lifted a shoulder. "Still feels like someone could walk in and tell me they gave this office to the wrong person." Evan walked toward her slowly, unhurried, as if the distance between them was something he enjoyed crossing. "That will never happen. You earned this." Harper laughed softly. "You say that like my imposter syndrome listens to you." Evan stopped in front of her close enough that she could feel the quiet energy radiating from him. "It listens to me when I am right, and I am right about you more often than you think." She felt warmth bloom across her chest, the kind that came not from flattery, but from recognition. Harper returned her gaze to the window. The river glimmered like a ribbon of liquid gold. A year ago, she would have been downstairs fixing a computer no one appreciated. A year ago, she would have been invisible. Then all of this happened. Then he happened. Evan reached into his jacket and held out a small silver object. A key. Harper raised a brow. "You finally giving me access to the executive espresso machine?" Evan chuckled quietly. "Tempting, but no. It is a key to your new data integrity lab. It is fully yours. Build whatever team you need." Harper stared at him, stunned. "Finn, that is generously irresponsible." Evan tilted his head. "You deserve the freedom to build the safeguards this company will rely on for the next decade. And you deserve to do it your way." Harper swallowed a rising wave of emotion. She looked down at the key and turned it in her fingers. "Thank you for trusting me." Evan stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that only she could hear. "Trusting you was the easiest decision I have ever made." Her heart fluttered in a way that always caught her off guard. Evan stood beside her, both of them looking out over the city. She felt the quiet between them settle naturally, the kind that came only after surviving too much together. After a moment, Evan spoke again. "Do you remember the first time we stood this high above the city? The rooftop night, the confession about his brother, the moment their lives shifted?" Harper nodded. "Yes." Evan's voice softened. "I think that was when I knew." Harper turned. "Knew what?" Evan met her eyes without hesitation. "That you were going to change everything." Harper felt her breath catch. She tried to speak, but no words arrived. Evan smiled faintly. "You do not have to say anything. I am not asking for answers, just telling the truth." Harper looked down at the key in her hand to steady herself. The sunlight caught on its metal edge. Something inside her loosened. Evan glanced at his watch. "Are you free for lunch?" Harper raised a brow. "Evan, I have 12 meetings today." Evan gave her a knowing smile. "And you have rescheduled all 12 before." Harper sighed dramatically. "Does the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company have no respect for my meticulous calendar?" Evan smirked. "None at all." He stepped back. "I will be in the lobby in 15 minutes." Harper watched him turn to leave, but he paused in the doorway and looked back at her. "There is something else." Harper blinked. "Something else?" Evan nodded slowly. "About tonight." Harper's pulse jumped. "Tonight." He hesitated, then spoke with a softness that held no uncertainty, only intention. "There is a dinner. The board wants us both there. They want to honor you officially." Harper stiffened. "Evan? I do not like those events. All the staring, all the questions." Evan stepped closer again. "I know. That is why I'm telling you now. If you do not want to go, we will not go." Harper blinked. "We." Evan nodded. "We." Something warm threaded through her, quiet but deep. Harper exhaled. "I will go." Evan studied her for a moment. "And you will let me stand beside you." Harper felt heat rush to her cheeks. "Yes." Evan's expression softened into something that made her chest feel too small. "Good, because I'm not letting you face that room alone." After he left, Harper sank into her chair and covered her face with her hands for a moment. How had her life changed so quickly? How had her world expanded in ways she could barely comprehend? She looked at the key again, closed her fingers around it gently. Everything she had fought through, the danger, the sabotage, the humiliation, the locked server room. The moment she nearly collapsed, all of it led here, to this quiet sunlit room, to a future she never thought would be hers, to a man she never expected would see her. Harper breathed in deeply. Later that evening, she arrived at the corporate event hall dressed simply but gracefully, choosing soft navy instead of anything flashy. When she stepped inside the room filled with board members, executives, journalists, and city officials, she almost turned back. Then she saw him. Evan stood near the center of the hall speaking to 2 senior board members. But the moment Harper entered the room, his attention snapped instantly to her. The noise, the crowd, the conversation faded. He excused himself gently from the board members and walked toward her, not rushed, not dramatic, but with that same steady intention that had marked every choice he made since she entered his life. When he reached her, he offered his hand. A small gesture, but meaningful. Harper placed her hand in his. The warmth of his palm steadied her. Evan leaned just slightly closer. "You look like the strongest person in this room," Harper whispered. "I am only standing because you are beside me." Evan's eyes softened. "Then we stand together." For the rest of the night, they moved through the crowd as a pair. People asked her questions about the investigation. She answered quietly. People told her she saved the company. Evan corrected them each time. She saved people, not systems, not structures, people. When the chairman raised a glass to toast her courage, the entire room applauded. Harper's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Evan placed a gentle hand at her back, steadying her. Toward the end of the evening, Harper stepped outside onto the balcony seeking air. The city stretched beneath her, the horizon washed in soft evening gold. Evan joined her, silently resting one elbow against the railing. He watched her rather than the view. "This feels unreal," she whispered. Evan nodded. "Maybe, but it is real, and you earned every bit of it." Harper looked down at her hands, the ones that once trembled in fear, the ones Evan had held, the ones that saved him that night without her realizing who he was. Harper's voice softened. "Evan." He looked at her instantly. Yes. She met his gaze slowly, steadily. "Thank you for choosing me." Evan's expression tightened in the gentlest way, as if emotion had pressed quietly against his ribs. "Harper," he said softly, "I did not choose you because of what you did. I chose you because of who you are." She felt her chest twist warm and tender. Evan inched a little closer, careful not to cross a line without her permission. But Harper closed the distance herself by the smallest degree and leaned her shoulder against his arm. Evan stilled as if absorbing the meaning of that simple gesture. Harper whispered, "You can stand close to me." Just exhaled shakily. "Then I will." And they stayed like that, watching the city below them, glowing with the kind of serenity that comes after storms long fought. Harper closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet beat of hope. The truth was simple. She had saved him in ways she never intended. And he had changed her life in ways she never expected. The girl who once worked in the basement now stood at the top of the tower beside the man who once carried the weight of the world alone. The city lights shimmered like a promise. And for the first time, Harper let herself believe she deserved everything that had blossomed from the night she risked her life for a stranger at 3 a.m. The future was not guaranteed. But it was theirs, together. If you are still here listening to Harper and Evan's story, then thank you for staying with me until the very end, because this is the kind of story that reminds us how one moment, one choice, one act of courage can change 2 lives forever. And maybe it reminds you of something in your own life too, the night you helped someone without expecting anything back, the moment you chose kindness, even when no one was watching, the day someone finally saw you after years of feeling invisible. Stories like this are not about billionaires or big companies or dramatic boardrooms. They are about what happens when 2 people who were never supposed to meet collide in the most unexpected way and somehow manage to make each other braver. If Harper had not stepped into that flooded basement at 3 a.m, if she had turned away, if she had convinced herself she was too small to matter, then Evan would still be carrying the weight of his brother's death alone, and thousands of people might have been at risk. And if Evan had not shown up on her doorstep the next morning, if he had not chosen to listen to a girl the world overlooked, then the truth would have stayed buried, and Harper would have stayed a name no one ever knew. But that is the thing. It only takes one person to look at you differently for everything to shift. So, if there is someone in your life who has ever stood up for you, believed in you, or chosen you in a way you never expected, take a moment right now and think about them. And if you have ever been that person for someone else, then you already know how powerful one small act of courage can be. I want to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Are you in the United States, Canada, London, Jamaica, South Africa, Trinidad, India, the Philippines? Wherever you are, tell me your city or your country because I love seeing how this little community is spread across the world. And tell me this too. Do you believe that kindness between strangers can change everything? Do you believe that two people from opposite worlds can find each other at the exact moment they need someone the most? And if you were in Harper's shoes, would you have helped a stranger at 3 in the morning? Or if you were in Evan's place, would you have gone to her door the next day? I read every comment, every single one. If you felt something during this story, even just for a moment, tell me what it was. Was it the rooftop scene? The boardroom moment when Evan said, "If you fire her, you fire me"? The press conference? The epilogue? Or maybe it was something smaller like the way Harper kept choosing courage even when nobody believed her. And if this story meant something to you even a little bit, please consider liking the video because it truly helps the channel grow and reach more people who love emotional stories just like this. And if you are new here or you have been listening for a while but have not subscribed yet, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. We post cinematic emotional romance stories every week. Stories that make you feel something real. Stories about integrity, courage, unexpected love, chosen family, and the quiet heroes who walk among us every day. And before you go, let me ask you one last question. If Harper and Evan's story continued 1 year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, what do you think their future would look like? Do you see them building a life together? Leading the company as partners? Starting something new? Whatever you imagine, tell me in the comments. I cannot wait to read your version of their forever. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until the next story, I hope you stay safe, stay kind, and never forget that your smallest act of courage might be the moment that changes someone else's whole world.